Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my Des Moines-based colleague, Sarah Muller, here at the Iowa State Fair. So cheers to the first Sunday of the fair. Got another lemonade.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk with you about what we saw today. We had the privilege to talk to voters all across the state fair. What are some of your takeaways?
It's interesting because some of the people who have come today were not here yesterday, so they didn't hear the things that we have heard or seen. But it's interesting to hear where the Trump DeSantis debate is. A lot of people are saying, I'm interested in DeSantis, but I think Trump's going to win, or I'm interested in Trump, but I don't think, I do like DeSantis. It's a whole wide range of reactions. I also met somebody who got swayed over to the Burgum side this week, and so thought that he was really interesting, thought he was a good Midwestern candidate. He's been governor, he has background in it. So it's interesting to see how the fair can sway people.
What I found interesting, and let me know if you found this as well, Trump supporters that I've talked to are firmly and adamantly Trump supporters. They're not going to be swayed come the Iowa caucuses. On the other hand, other GOP voters who are open to other candidates could potentially be swayed. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are very open-minded. That's what you and I talked about yesterday. Trump people are very strong in the Trump mindset. There's some people who say, I like Trump, but I think it's gone too far at this point, or I don't think that, he can win another election given that he lost in 2020. But I think we're at a point where people are still open-minded. What I hear a lot is we're still quite a ways out. We've got quite a few months until January when the caucuses are going to happen. And so there's a lot of time to sway voters still.
When you were talking with voters the past few days and even today, what was resonating with them?
I think the background, the credentials behind some of these people, some people want to have somebody with a business background who's not in politics, who doesn't have maybe a huge political background, while others are very adamant about, I want somebody who's been in politics, who understands politics. Just because you have a big business and you own a lot of, real estate, or you have a big net worth, doesn't mean that you're qualified to run. And so that was kind of interesting, the background of people. Also, it seems like people are getting the message that a lot of these candidates have similar messages. They're just slightly tweaked. And so they're kind of like, which option, which variation of the same piece of pie am I going to get?
I asked the question to a lot of voters of who is most surprising to you. And every time, or most every time, I heard the candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's talk about him. What has been the response to Vivek?
Vivek has had a great reception here at the Iowa State Fair. One thing you and I talked about yesterday was that, he was really doing the Jimmy Carter of it all, shaking hands, holding his baby, talking to everybody about what their issues were, whereas some candidates were just walking and waving. I mean, there wasn't that much engagement. And so I think that personability, and like you and I said, he's a great public speaker. He can really get a crowd worked. And so I think that resonated with a lot of people. Plus, he's young and he's fresh. And I think that people definitely resonate with that as well.
We talked a lot about the issues today with voters and what issues matter to them when they're deciding who they want to support. What are the issues you're hearing?
To no one's surprise, it's definitely the economy, inflation. People are worried about the cost of living. People are worried about gas prices. People are worried about the fact that they're not getting paid necessarily enough to keep up with the rising costs. And so everybody's worried about that. China, you and I have heard a lot of messages about China this week. And I think a lot of people are kind of confused on, where exactly does China land in this next election?
You're a native Iowan, and I am not, but when I was here, a lot of people said that they feel like Washington, D.C. sort of forgot about them. There is this disconnect between Iowa, the heartland, and D.C. Can you speak to that?
I think it's interesting because one of the things we saw in 2016 when we as a country thought Hillary Clinton was in the lead was because the polls were not considering Central America, talking about, Iowa, the Midwest, and now these polls are really focusing because they don't want to get that wrong again. And obviously, Democrats leaving Iowa for first in the nation status, they feel really abandoned. That's what I also heard this weekend, is that people feel like, Joe Biden hasn't shown up in Iowa since announcing his run. People are feeling like, where is he? I mean, has he completely given up on us and gone to South Carolina? So there's a lot of concern about, our status and the issues that we care about, including, for example, agriculture. I'm surprised how little agriculture concerns have been brought up in some of these conversations with candidates.
Now, looking ahead, you mentioned that Joe Biden most likely will not be here. He didn't show up yet, and there aren't plans for him to show up to the Iowa State Fair. Who else haven't we seen?
Yet this week we have not seen Tim Scott. Tim Scott is planning on coming on Tuesday. Will Hurd will be here next weekend. There's a couple other candidates who are polling a little bit lower who are going to be here next weekend. But yeah, it was a little surprising who hasn't shown up the first weekend of the fair, the first Saturday of the fair, which is kind of the most important.
We also saw Christie, former governor of New Jersey, doing events in New Hampshire as the Iowa State Fair is going on. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to split their time with New Hampshire. I'm hearing from candidates that they are flying back and forth. They're trying to plan their time evenly because it's a fast turnaround. After the Iowa caucuses, they have to be in New Hampshire and get that face time. So I understand why they're splitting their time, but I'd like to see Christie here. We haven't seen much of him.
Sarah, you have been my Iowa tour guide the past few days. You are the Iowa State Fair guru. You've covered many political events here. What's different this year than years past?
I think it's the pacing of these candidates. We saw a lot of people yesterday. There's virtually no one here today. Binkley had one event, but other than that, the fact that Tim Scott didn't show up the first weekend, Christie's not here, Will Hurd's not here, and the first weekend's the big deal. So the pacing has been a little bit weird this time around.
Definitely. Yesterday we were back to back to back with political events. Today, we did have the opportunity to talk to a lot of voters, but we were talking to more voters than the candidates, it seems.
Yes. There are a ton of, obviously, voters around here, but at the end of the day, I even heard from people, I was hoping to see some candidates today, but no one's here. So, yeah, it's a little odd to see the pacing, for sure.
Sarah Muller, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.